They say every town has a place where time moves different, slower, softer, almost like the walls themselves are listening. In the town of Jackson Creek, Mississippi, that place was Marie's diner. It sat on the corner of Walnut and Sycamore, wedged between a sun-faded hardware store and an old gas station that still had analog pumps and a bell that dinged every time a car pulled in. From the outside, Marie's looked like nothing. A sagging blue awning, chipped white paint curling off the wood siding, a hand-painted sign that read, "Open, sometimes." But inside, it held something folks couldn't quite name. Something like memory. Or maybe grace. Every Sunday, just after the street lamps clicked off and before the church bells rang out, Walter Jennings would walk in. Always the same. Same boots, same faded green army jacket with threadbare elbows, same slow nod to whoever looked up. He didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, he used words like ration matches small, steady, and sparing. People called him Mr. Walter, even the ones older than him. You just did. It wasn't about age. It was about something else. Something earned. Walter always sat in the second booth by the window. Not the first two, much glare. Not the third two, close to the kitchen. Second one. Just right. Marie knew not to ask what he wanted. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Peach pie, crust crisp dark around the edges. That booth. That pie. That quiet, that was church to him. Most folks in Jackson Creek had some idea of Walter's past, but no one knew the whole thing. There were whispers, sure. Vietnam. Medals. Something about a bridge and a boy in a radio call that saved a convoy. But Walter didn't talk about the war unless he was telling you how he once caught dysentery from bad water or how he learned to boil coffee with a cigarette lighter. That was his way. If it hurt, he kept it under the surface, like a rock under the river. Now, this story doesn't start with a war. It starts with a morning that should have been like any other. Birds were just starting to chatter, mist still curled around the base of the street signs, and the windows of Marie's glowed soft with the smell of bacon and biscuits inside. Walter came in, nodded like always, and slid into his booth. Marie nodded back. Lena, her granddaughter, was behind the counter, still yawning into her apron. Across town, 3 boys had just hit the edge of boredom. Caleb, Nico, and Marcus. College dropouts, self-declared pranksters, the kind of guys who thought disrespect was edgy and sarcasm was a substitute for character. They'd been filming content all week for their YouTube channel challenges, public dares, and cruel jokes on unsuspecting strangers. And that Sunday, they had a new idea. Go into a sleepy southern diner, rile up the locals, and record the chaos. Real edgy stuff. They rolled into Marie's with a Bluetooth speaker blaring bass, a camera clipped to Caleb's chest, and sneakers that squeaked like their egos. The second they opened the door, the diner felt it. That shift. Like a cold draft from nowhere. Caleb scanned the room. Grinned. Looks like a Civil War museum in here. Marie gave a warning look. Lena stiffened. Walter didn't move. They slid into the booth behind Walter. Loud, laughing, cracking jokes like middle school bullies who'd aged but never grown up. Caleb nudged Nico and gestured to Walter. You think he actually fought in a war or just plays dress up for the discount? Nico smirked. Ask him. Go full viral. Caleb leaned over the booth, raised his voice just enough to pull the room's attention. Hey, Grandpa, you ever shoot anybody with that jacket on? Or is it just your emotional support outfit? The diner froze. Forks stopped midair. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hesitate. Walter turned his head slowly. His eyes met Caleb's. Calm. Clear. No anger. Just presence. Son, he said, you talk real loud for someone who ain't got a clue. Caleb blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Means, Walter said. You walked in here looking to be seen. And now you are. So act like it matters. The boys laughed, nervous this time. Marie moved from behind the counter, hands on hips. That's enough. But Walter held up a hand. Let it ride. Sometimes a man's got to walk through his own echo. What followed wasn't a speech. It wasn't righteous fury. It was memory, slow, painful, personal. Walter talked. Not loud. Not fast. But clear. He talked about Hughes City. About the Tet Offensive. About crawling through mud with a 19-year-old from Michigan whose leg was gone and who wouldn't stop asking for his mother. He told them about carrying that boy on his back while taking fire from both sides and watching the sky refuse to give them a bird to get out. He told them about coming home to a country that looked past him, about walking into banks in uniform and being told they didn't lend to his type, about Margaret, his wife, who waited and wrote and prayed only to die in a car accident the night before he got home. He told them about arriving at the bus stop with a duffel bag and a funeral to miss. He didn't cry. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke. By the end, the only sound in the room was the quiet clink of Marcy, another regular, setting down her fork and folding her hands. Caleb's camera was still running, but he wasn't smiling anymore. "You came in here," Walter said, "to poke at something you don't understand. That jacket ain't for show. It's what I came home in. Only thing that still fits. Not because I haven't changed, but because the world don't always give you space to." Nico tried to crack a joke, something about PTSD and pie, but Lena cut him off. She stepped from behind the counter, face red, hands shaking. "That man's the reason my uncle came home," she said. "Saved him, pulled him out of a minefield, held his hand when he couldn't scream. That man's name is in a letter my uncle keeps in his Bible." The third guy, Marcus, hadn't said a word the whole time. Now he stood, walked to Walter's table. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Walter just nodded. The next day, the video went viral. Not because someone yelled, but because someone listened. The story didn't end there. It stretched. It echoed. A teacher played the clip in class. A pastor read Walter's words from the pulpit. Kids started showing up at Marie's to shake his hand, ask him questions. He didn't always answer. Sometimes he just nodded. Sometimes that was enough. A month later, the mayor asked him to speak at the Veterans Day ceremony. He refused. Said he wasn't a speaker. Wasn't a hero. Just a man who came home wearing a jacket and carrying names no one asked to hear. But eventually, he said yes, not for the ceremony, but for the kids who kept asking about courage. And that day, under a too bright sun and a flag that rippled like it was holding back tears, Walter said the one thing that stuck longer than any headline. "You don't have to fight in a war to be brave," he said. "Sometimes it's brave just to stay kind in a loud, cruel room." That line ended up in textbooks, printed on posters, shared in eulogies. But Walter never changed, never chased attention, still sat in that second booth, still drank his coffee black, still looked out that window like he was waiting on something sacred. And maybe he was, because every Sunday after that, someone new came in, not to eat, but to learn, to listen, to say thank you. And Marie's diner, with its old paint and flickering sign, became more than a diner. It became a place where noise ended and truth began. And if you're still listening, maybe ask yourself this: when's the last time you looked past someone's jacket and asked about the story underneath it? Because you just might find that respect doesn't start with shouting. It starts with silence. And stories like Walter's? They don't need permission to matter. So if this moved, you didn't just scroll. Leave a comment. Share your thoughts. Tell us what respect looks like in your life. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. There are more stories coming, ones you won't find in headlines, but that you'll carry with you long after the screen goes dark.